and welcome to SF Live. I'm your host, Christina Marie Flores. Well, tonight our guest is raised in Kansas, has worked in the corporate world, is a Vietnam veteran, the financial manager of Good Vibrations, was appointed to the Civil Rights Commission, and now serves as the president of the SF Police Commission. Please help me welcome this evening Theresa Sparks.
Thank you, Christina.
What was life like in Kansas while you were young?
Oh, I grew up in Beaver Cleaverland. I mean, really, it was like a little house, and we had neighbors, and the grade schools down the street. And I mean, it was real, just middle class, Midwest. And I had a great childhood. I had no question about it.
What did you want to be when you were a kid?
I wanted to be in the Army. I always, all my life, I wanted to be in the Army. In fact, my first experience with politics was that when I graduated from high school, I had obtained an appointment to the U.S. Military Academy in West Point, and that's what I'd always wanted to be as a career soldier. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to go, I got a letter from the senator who had appointed me and said that he'd found a more qualified candidate and that I was going to have to be an alternate. And as it turned out, the more qualified candidate was his nephew, who lasted only 3 months and then dropped out.
Oh, that's not fair.
Yeah.
So you eventually did go into the service. Was it the Army that you went into?
I went in the Navy.
In the Navy. And what position did you have there?
I was kind of a fancy clerk. I worked at an intelligence center in Hawaii for a year, and then I was on a boat for a year as an intelligence clerk kind of a person. Was
it a good fit for what you wanted to be a soldier and you were there?
No, I was, at that point, I kind of was a rebel, I mean, I used to wear my shower shoes to work every day, and it really used to get mad at me, but there really wasn't anything they could do because, they had to have everybody and they couldn't, discharge you, and so I was kind of there, and I was just kind of a pain in everyone's rear end, but it was fine. I served, 2 years honorably and over 2 years and got out, and, it was what it was. It's one of those things. I'm really glad I did it, but I would never obviously want to do it again any time in my life. But interestingly enough, my oldest son is in fact a career Marine.
Oh, really? Okay. And you have 3 children?
I do. I have my oldest son, who's a career Marine. He's a captain in the Marine Corps. And my daughter works for a company, a dating company, a company in the Midwest that does dating services things, and she's does all their computer stuff, internet stuff. And then my youngest son always was a bartender, and he did stand-up comedy for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
In Kansas.
It runs in the family.
Well, what he would do is, he would try it out there as a bartender. And, the stories would be is all these girls would be lined up because he was so funny, and then he'd get on the bar, and then he really did well, so they gave him a megaphone, and, it's kind of like that, yeah.
Very good. Yeah. Very cool. So after you were in the services, then you came out, and you were married then?
I was.
And that was your first, you've been married twice.
I've been married twice.
So when you were married, you came out to your wife at the time that you had different feelings. And could you explain a little bit to us about what transpired when you spoke about what you were feeling at that time?
Well, we'd been married quite a while. I mean, 7, 8 years, and had 3 kids, and we're married very young, and weren't doing really that well anyway. And so I started, having issues with my gender identity and problems that I'd had all my life, but they kind of manifest themselves in odd ways, in different ways, and so I thought, I needed to tell somebody. Because at that point, when you do that, particularly back then, there was no internet, and so you really do think you're alone in this thing. You think you're just weird because there's nowhere to go to look and to see. And so I decided that I needed to tell someone, and so I told my best friend, who was my wife at the time, and she totally freaked out and asked me to leave, which I did, and we ended up getting divorced. So it all happened very quickly from that point.
And did you have anyone growing up that you knew that you could speak with about it? Not at all until that point?
No, not really.
It's amazing that the internet now is so open that you really can communicate and find other people.
It is. And, and there's lots of people out there now. And, but even I even went to psychiatrists and psychologists back then for other issues, but in reality I wanted to find out about this, and I had psychologists tell me that it was good because they would learn about this with me as we were
really,
so they didn't even know anything about it. And so it was difficult back then. And a lot of people my age who ended up transitioning, I think, had very similar experiences.
So it was at the very beginning of when therapists got to learn on how to speak with or deal with?
Well, Christina Jorgensen, was in the 60s, and she was one of the first that was highly publicized. Stanford and Johns Hopkins University started gender identity clinics, I think in the 70s, I want to say, late 70s, early 80s maybe. And so there was starting to be in academia, there was some research done on it, and, it just kind of grew from there. But I would say the internet probably was the biggest thing ever for people's understanding of what gender identity is.
It brings them together to be able to have a discussion. So when you first went through the different therapy sessions, was it to try to talk yourself out of it? Or
Absolutely.
It wasn't...
Well, you just want to understand it, but ultimately you want it to go away. You want to be normal. You just want it to go away. You want to be normal. You don't want to deal with this. And a lot of times the way psychiatrists, I did electric shock treatment for a period in the 80s, and for a very short period, because I figured at that point that really wasn't going to work. But they try to, for whatever reason, they want you to talk through it and reinforce the feelings of guilt back then. And so they figure if you're guilty enough about it, that you'll stop. And you do for a while. But that's not a solution. That just makes you guilty. Makes you feel worse, ultimately.
That's amazing to me that it was as recent as the 80s that they were still doing those procedures. And that, it's incredible to me. I've just been around, San Francisco so long that I'm in this wonderful place where everybody is who they are.
Well, that was actually in Los Angeles.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so it was in California, too.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
it was in
amazing.
the early 80s.
And at what point in the therapy that you went to did you decide, this is who I am? I'm not trying to change
that actually didn't happen until the late 90s, until 96, 97. And I actually came to San Francisco intentionally because not only did I love the city, because I'd been here many times, but I moved here in 97 just specifically because I knew there were a qualified gender therapist here. And I actually started going to see two simultaneously because the way I am, I never trust one. So I'd have to go see two. And so I actually went to two at the same time for over a year to figure it out.
Now, at that time, you have 3 children. And what were the children saying? Were you out to them? Did they understand?
I did, and they didn't. I came out to them in the mid-90s. Actually, no, take that back. I came out to them in, the mid-90s, 97, 98. And neither one of my sons spoke to me after that for a long time, for almost 10 years. My daughter did, and she tried to understand, and she did. It was a little difficult at first. But as time went on, we became friends, and then we became best friends, and today we are best friends.
That's wonderful.
And so she's kind of supported me all the way through. My 2 sons, I reinstituted the relationship. It's literally been in the last year.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you came here in 97? And you then lived as a woman, or is that
I transitioned, right in 97, 98.
And that's when you were speaking about looking for work at that point.
And looking. Yeah, I thought it would be, of course, I came from a corporate world. I'd been CEO of multinational corporations for 20 years. And my last one we sold, and my friends assumed that my next step would be like a Fortune 500 company, because it was privately held. But, life took me a little different direction. And so I assumed, people would look at my skills and look at my experience and look at my accomplishments. And that wasn't the case. Over 100 times that wasn't the case. 100
times. Yeah. And you have the full skill set that you need, and probably more than you need in some of the cases.
Right. And I ended up driving a cab for a while, and I was a census taker for a while, and I worked as a teller in a bank for a while, and so you do what you have to do.
And during those times, did you have run-ins with the police? I mean, were there certain times that you were harassed or felt?
I really never did. In fact, when I was driving a cab, I had really good experience with the police. I got in an accident, and the cop came, and he was very nice to me, and I didn't have a negative, but I knew a lot of people that did, and.